He was born wearing a crown, but with bones that refused to grow straight. His jaw jutted forward grotesquely. His tongue was too large for his mouth. His eyes were small, his forehead bulging, and his speech unintelligible. He couldn't chew. He couldn't walk until age 8. But none of that mattered, because his blood was this royal. His ancestors believed purity came from keeping the bloodline clean. No outsiders, no commoners, just cousin after cousin, uncle to niece, father to daughter. Till one day, a child was born so twisted by genetics, he became a living symbol of royal decay. His name was Charles II of Spain, but history remembers him as something else. He was the final product of 200 years of inbreeding, and when it came time for him to marry, the family found him a bride with the purest blood they could. It was the same blood that had created him. What no one dared say out loud was that he had married the only woman who could look at him without flinching, because she was his mother. Charles II entered the world under a veil of silence, not because it was a quiet birth, but because no one knew how to react. The child was alive, but something was terribly wrong. His limbs were soft and limp. His eyes refused to focus. His tongue filled his entire mouth, forcing him to breathe through his nose and drool constantly. Nurses exchanged glances, but no one dared speak. He was, after all, the heir to the Spanish Empire. At first, the court blamed the midwives. Then they blamed the stars. But they knew the truth. Charles was a walking reflection of everything the Habsburg dynasty had done to itself. His deformities weren't isolated, they were inherited. By age 4, Charles still couldn't speak. At 5, he couldn't stand without help. When he turned 8, his bones were so fragile, a simple fall left him bedridden for weeks. And yet, royal artists continued painting him as a strong and noble prince, erect posture, regal attire, wide eyes that hid the suffering no brush could capture. The irony was cruel. The child who embodied centuries of royal pride couldn't walk unaided, couldn't eat without choking, and couldn't learn to read. But he could wear a crown, and in the eyes of the court, that was all that mattered. Behind closed doors, his mother, Mariana of Austria, became his caretaker, not just in duty, but in full dependence. She dressed him, fed him, shielded him from foreign dignitaries who came to assess his condition. Some believed Mariana's protectiveness bordered on obsession. Others said she was simply covering for the grotesque truth that her son would never rule as a true king, only as a puppet. As Charles grew, so did the rumors. Was he cursed? Possessed? Diseased? The Spanish people prayed for their king's health, but no prayers could fix what had been broken at birth. Physicians tried everything: bleaching, bloodletting, even potions made from powdered pearls. Nothing worked. But the most disturbing truth wasn't his illness. It was what came next. Because despite everything, the Spanish court still expected him to marry and to produce an heir. And when they chose his bride, they didn't look far. They looked into the mirror and found a woman with blood just like his. Almost too much like his. In 1679, at the age of 18, Charles II was declared ready to marry, but behind palace doors there was panic. Who could possibly become his queen? He could barely speak. He could not ride, command an army, or produce intelligent conversation. His tongue was still swollen, his body frail, and his mind distant. And yet tradition demanded he take a wife and secure the royal bloodline. So the search began, not for love, but for blood. The court insisted on a woman of pure lineage. That meant no outsiders, no deviation, no danger to the legacy, only a girl from within the sacred web of Habsburg ancestry. After months of political games, they found her Marie-Louise of Orléans, a young woman from French royalty, but also Charles's own maternal cousin. Some records even suggest she shared more DNA with him than his mother did. She was just 17. beautiful, terrified. When Marie-Louise arrived in Spain, she was greeted not by a king but by a boy locked inside a broken man's body. Charles was kind but childlike. He slobbered, limped, and struggled to form sentences. The wedding went on anyway, a grand cathedral, a golden crown, but behind the veil, Marie-Louise wept. For the next 10 years, she lived in a state of quiet suffering. The marriage was never consummated. Charles, incapable of fathering a child, remained obsessed with her, following her through the palace like a lost puppy. Courtiers began to whisper the queen was more his nurse than his wife. But some whispers were darker. Rumors spread that Charles had confused maternal care with something deeper, that he clung to Marie-Louise not as a husband, but as a surrogate mother, seeking the same comfort, the same safety, the same twisted familiarity he had known with Mariana, the woman who had raised him, protected him, and possibly shaped his earliest understanding of love. Marie-Louise died young, at just 26, likely from depression and starvation. Charles never recovered. He spiraled into greater weakness, deeper madness. The line was still unbroken, but empty. No air, no strength. Just one last flickering ember of a dynasty on the edge of extinction. And the court, still unwilling to face the truth, began searching for another bride. Another woman with the same cursed blood. By the time Charles II entered his 30s, the Spanish Empire was crumbling, and so was he. His fingernails grew long and curled. His teeth rotted. His mind slipped further into shadows. And still he wore the crown. The Spanish court became a battlefield of factions, priests, nobles, doctors, and foreign ambassadors, all fighting for control behind the king's back. Charles, too weak to speak at council meetings, would often fall asleep mid-ceremony. He became the empire's greatest secret, a hollow figurehead propped up in public, hidden in private, and pitied in every corner of Europe. Desperate for an heir, the court arranged a second marriage, this time to Maria Anna of Neuburg, a distant cousin from the Austrian Habsburg line. She was strong-willed, politically sharp, and thoroughly horrified by the man she was meant to call husband. Like his first queen, she failed to conceive. But it wasn't her failure. It was his. Charles's body could no longer function. He was sterile, impotent, and plagued with infections. Royal doctors eventually performed an autopsy, secretly and only after his death, and what they found was grotesque. His heart was shriveled. His intestines were gangrenous. His body had only one functioning testicle. His head was filled with water. He had, in every sense, been born to die. When Charles II finally passed away in 1700 at the age of 38, he left behind no child, no legacy, and no future. What he left instead was a war, the War of the Spanish Succession, as rival dynasties fought to claim the empty throne. The Habsburg dynasty in Spain was dead, not from rebellion, not from assassination, but from within, from bloodlines too tangled to breathe, from centuries of obsession with power, purity, and control. The royal line had folded in on itself until it collapsed, and Charles, the man born of mother-like blood, became the final exhale of a dynasty that had once ruled the world. The crown remained, but the family behind it had disappeared. Charles II was not a monster by choice. He was born into a myth, a belief that royal blood must remain untouched, unspoiled, sacred. But what his ancestors called purity was a slow, deliberate self-destruction. He became the final portrait of a dynasty that valued blood over breath, lineage over life. His broken body carried the weight of centuries. His silence echoed louder than any king's decree. In the end, he ruled nothing, not his people, not his body, not even his fate. He was royal only by name, tragic by design. And as history turned the page, one truth remained. Sometimes the crown isn't passed down by power or right.